You know, usually when we talk about a diet, there's this, like, expectation of tracking and control.
Right, like a literal pie chart.
Exactly. Calories in, calories out. You choose what you put on your plate, you sit down, and you consume it.
It's a very intentional, visible process. You know exactly what you're digesting.
Yeah, and you generally know when you're full. The biological feedback loop functions the way it was, designed to.
But step into the world of our modern digital media diet, and suddenly that pie chart is completely useless.
Totally useless. We are definitely not at a salad bar anymore.
No, we are not.
We are sitting at an all-you-can-eat buffet, but the buffet itself is studying you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's rearranging the food based on your eye movements, tracking the micro-hesitations in your scrolling thumb, and feeding you sugar before you even consciously realize you're hungry.
It is the absolute definition of a curated algorithmic reality. I mean, the platform isn't just serving you content.
Right.
It is actively modifying your appetite.
That is a wild way to think about it. Well, if you're listening, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here with you all.
Today, our mission is to analyze this massive stack of data from April 2026. We are pulling from Wikipedia's latest YouTube subscriber records, global viewership statistics, engagement metrics, and this really revealing Future Media Hub's 2026 trend report.
It's a lot of data.
It is. And the goal here is for you to really understand how we consume information today, what is actively capturing our attention, and, why traditional media is struggling so hard to keep up.
And honestly, the sheer scale of the data we're looking at, it requires us to completely reframe how we think about audience and influence.
Right, the old metrics are dead.
Exactly. The numbers have grown so huge that our traditional comparisons like, television ratings or box office numbers, they just don't apply anymore.
Let's set the scene for you with a quick snapshot of where things stand as of April 2026.
Okay.
Sitting at the absolute top of the YouTube mountain is MrBeast.
Naturally.
He is currently at a staggering 477 million subscribers.
That number is just, it's hard to even process.
And he's not slowing down either.
Yeah.
The data shows he is gaining an average of 133,000 subscribers every single day.
Which is roughly the equivalent of adding the entire population of a small city to your audience.
Yeah.
Daily.
Daily. And in doing so, he officially avenged PewDiePie by dethroning India's T-Series, which is currently sitting at 311 million subscribers.
Right.
But this isn't just a story about big numbers. It is a story about human psychology.
Yeah.
And how the architecture of these platforms is actively rewiring what we value and how we connect.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin to measure the foundation of what people are actually watching?
Well, we have to start by looking at the pure volume of views, the billion view club.
Okay.
Raw viewership tells us what the platform is built on at its core.
Where?
And if you look at the most viewed video of all time, it is not a Hollywood blockbuster.
Right.
And it's not some major historical news event. It's Baby Shark Dance.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it sits at a colossal 16.6 billion views. 16.6 billion. That is literally double the human population of the planet.
And it is not an anomaly either.
No.
Not at all. Children's content entirely dominates the top charts. Like CoComelon holds multiple spots on the top 20 list. You've got videos like Wheels on the Bus pulling in 8.5 billion views.
Wow. And the other foundational pillar has to be music, right? Because Luis Fonsi's Despacito is still massive at 8.9 billion views.
Yep.
And Adele's Hello hit a billion views in a record 87.4 days.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of why this happens and how it reveals the platform's architecture.
Okay, break that down for us.
So with music, the appeal is obvious. It transcends language barriers. A catchy rhythm works globally, whether you understand the lyrics or not.
Sure, that makes sense.
But with kids' content, we're looking at a completely different behavioral loop.
How so?
Toddlers have a developmental need for repetition. It's how their brains learn predictability in language.
Right, they want the same thing over and over.
Exactly. Children's videos benefit massively from the platform's autoplay feature, which basically capitalizes on that biological quirk. A child doesn't just watch a song once. They watch it 50 times in a row, and the algorithm gladly serves it up.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go ahead.
We are treating all views equally here, but cognitively, they aren't even close to the same thing.
True.
I look at that YouTube autoplay feature for kids, and it functions perfectly as a digital pacifier.
Oh, absolutely.
So if a toddler leaves an iPad running face down on the carpet for 3 hours while Wheels on the Bus plays on an endless loop, does a view actually mean attention? Or are we just measuring the efficiency of the algorithm feeding itself?
That digital pacifier concept is dead on. I mean, a view in the context of a nursery rhyme is overwhelmingly a measure of passive replay, not active cognitive engagement.
Right, because the algorithm optimizes for watch time.
Exactly. And nothing generates passive watch time quite like a distracted toddler or, a pop music playlist running in the background at a party.
It just racks up the numbers.
It inflates the numbers to the billions, yeah, but it completely obscures the depth of the connection. Someone might have a video playing, but they aren't actually looking at the screen.
But if a view is just a toddler staring at a digital pacifier or a song playing in an empty room, it's kind of a hollow metric.
It is.
To see what people actually care about, we have to look past the view counter and look at intentional action.
Right.
We have to look at the like button.
Because a view can be an accident, but a like is an intentional endorsement.
Yes.
It requires the viewer to overcome their natural inertia, physically reach out, and take an action. And when we filter the data by what viewers actually engage with, the landscape shifts dramatically.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In January 2026, the most liked video of all time changed.
It did.
For 7 years, the Despacito music video held the crown, sitting at 55 million likes.
Yeah.
An absolute global cultural juggernaut.
Untouchable, or so we thought.
Right. But it was dethroned by a 60-second YouTube short from MrBeast titled, "Would You Fly to Paris for a Baguette?" That short hit 56.5 million likes.
A 60-second stunt bypassed a globally produced music track that defined a decade of pop culture.
That's crazy.
It perfectly illustrates the engagement revolution. Short-form content is absolutely dominating how we interact online, and the mechanics behind it are brilliant.
And it's not just MrBeast either.
No, not at all.
The data points to creators like Daniel LaBelle doing a physical comedy sketch about cleaning as a time sport, and that got 39.3 million likes.
Right.
Or the channel How Ridiculous doing a massive balloon popping race which hit 43.5 million likes. You don't need a multi-million-dollar music studio to go viral globally anymore.
Exactly. You just need a visual language-neutral concept that triggers an immediate visceral reaction.
Like physical comedy.
Visual physical comedy and high-stakes, simple stunts transcend language just like music does, but they do it in 15 to 60 seconds.
Wow.
The sheer volume is unprecedented, with shorts surpassing 70 billion daily views back in late 2025.
70 billion a day.
But the critical insight here is the strategy behind it. These creators aren't just making shorts for the sake of cheap views. They are utilizing short-form content as a highly calibrated discovery funnel.
Okay, let's break down how that funnel actually works psychologically for the listener. How does a 15-second clip translate into long-term loyalty?
Think of it as an ecosystem of attention. Creators use the highly viral, algorithm-friendly shorts to cast a massive net.
Okay.
You hook the audience with a 60-second dopamine rush. Maybe it's a shocking statement, cliffhanger, or a highly visual stunt.
Just something to grab them.
Right. But the ultimate goal is to convert that momentary attention into deep parasocial investment by pushing them into long-form destinations.
Like podcasts.
Exactly. Video podcasts are dominating this space. Shannon Sharp's club, Shay, pulled in 528 million views by mastering this exact psychological bridge.
Wow.
The short-form clip gives you the provocative, quote, the secret being teased. But to get the context and the emotional payoff, you have to click through and watch the 2-hour interview.
So the short is essentially a beautifully decorated storefront window.
That's a great way to look at it.
It catches your eye as you're walking by on the street, flashing something shiny.
Yeah.
But the long-form video podcast is walking inside the store, browsing the aisles, and actually building a relationship with the shop owner.
Yes.
But looking at how dominant this funnel is, are our brains being trained to require an immediate 15-second dopamine hit before we're even willing to sit down for a meal?
That's the real concern.
Like, do we need the appetizer to literally explode before we order the entree?
The psychological conditioning of these platforms is actively eroding our patience for slow buildups.
Really?
If a creator doesn't hook the viewer in the first 3 seconds of that storefront window, the viewer will just keep walking down the street. They will swipe right to the next video.
Brutal.
The creators who are thriving in 2026 are the ones who have reverse engineered this neurological requirement. They understand that you have to earn the right to ask for an hour of someone's time by giving them a highly concentrated burst of value first.
And because these creators have mastered this short to long funnel, they have entirely bypassed traditional Hollywood studios.
Completely.
We aren't talking about kids in their bedrooms making vlogs with a webcam anymore.
Yeah.
We are looking at massive, independent media ecosystems that operate like multinational corporations.
Calling MrBeast a YouTuber at this point is like calling Disney a mouse company.
Huh. Right.
He is a brand leading a massive corporate team with logistics departments, dubbing studios, and engineering teams.
This industry.
He dominates multiple spots on the top 10 most liked list, including a video where he gave away actual iPhones instead of Halloween candy, and a massive cinematic collaboration with The Rock.
Insane.
These are highly produced, high-stakes productions that absolutely rival traditional television.
And the Future Media Hub's 2026 report highlights how creator-led franchises are extending far beyond real-life stunts to straight-up rival television networks.
Oh, yeah.
You have indie intellectual property like The Amazing Digital Circus generating 25 billion related views.
25 billion.
And Dress to Impress has 4 billion views. The insight here is that audiences don't just want to passively watch a sitcom anymore. They want to participate.
Exactly.
They want to create, remix, and belong to the universe.
That word belong is the key to understanding the next evolution of media. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what the report calls thirdscapes.
Okay, break down what a thirdscape actually looks and feels like.
A thirdscape is a persistent virtual world. Think of platforms like Roblox or deep, highly customizable in-game environments.
Okay.
For younger audiences, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, gaming is no longer about playing a linear level and beating a boss.
Right, it's not Super Mario.
Not at all. Gaming content has evolved from simple Let's Plays into deep investigative journalism, in-game documentaries, and cultural commentary happening inside these engines.
Inside the game itself.
Yes. These thirdscapes are social stages. You aren't just watching a creator's video, you are logging into a virtual lobby, wearing merchandise from that video, hanging out with your friends, and interacting with the lore.
So you're living in it.
It effectively blurs the line entirely between gaming, social media, and traditional media. The media is the environment you walk around in.
I have to challenge that idea of ultimate independence for a second, though.
Sure.
We look at MrBeast, we look at these massive Roblox creators building thirdscapes, and we say, look at these independent empires.
Right.
But digging into the Future Media Hub's report, are they really independent? Or are they actually just highly dependent subcontractors for big tech platforms?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because they are building these incredible castles, but they are building them on rented land.
Absolutely.
If YouTube tweaks its algorithm, or if a platform unilaterally shifts its monetization rules, these empires could see their revenues slashed overnight.
The vulnerability is very real. The democratization of content allows anyone to rise to the top, but they absolutely do not own the distribution pipes.
Right, they don't own the plumbing.
However, the influence they wield over their audiences within those rented walls is profound. The loyalty is fierce because these creators speak directly to their communities, often incorporating fan feedback into their next project.
So it's a two-way street.
Exactly. They have built a foundation of trust that acts as a buffer against algorithmic changes.
So these creators are building massive, loyal empires on rented land. But ironically, the legacy media companies who actually own their traditional distribution pipes are experiencing a total collapse of that exact same trust.
Yes, the irony is thick.
They are facing a catastrophic loss of audience connection.
The structural shift is undeniable here. Traditional media has completely lost its historical role as the gatekeeper of information.
Gone.
For decades, they decided what was important, printed it or broadcast it, and the public consumed it. But today, the traffic from search engines and social platforms to news sites is basically drying up.
Because the platforms don't want you to leave.
Exactly. They simply do not want users clicking away to read an external article. The algorithm is designed to keep you in the feed.
And the users themselves are actively pulling away too. The report highlights a massive growing wave of news fatigue.
Oh, people are exhausted.
They are intentionally avoiding the news because it is perceived as overwhelmingly negative, exhausting, and anxiety-inducing.
And the algorithm feeds on that.
Right, because the math of the algorithm prefers outrage, since anger spikes your heart rate and keeps your thumb scrolling longer than a nuanced, balanced journalistic article does.
It's a vicious cycle.
So instead of seeking out a challenging worldview, users are retreating into algorithmic echo chambers driven entirely by confirmation bias.
And as the economic models for traditional media fracture under this pressure, we're seeing structural ownership changes.
Like what?
Well, billionaires are buying up legacy media outlets, frequently injecting very specific ideological agendas into the editorial pipeline. Furthermore, the report notes a growing trend of radical politicians bypassing traditional media entirely. And, the data shows this structural shift occurring impartially on both ends of the political spectrum.
Yeah, left and right.
Politicians are using their own platforms, podcasts, and social networks to broadcast directly to their audiences. They are completely circumventing journalistic oversight, fact-checking, or any kind of pushback.
And just to be clear for you listening, we're not validating or criticizing any specific political side here.
Right.
We are simply reporting the structural reality of how the plumbing of information has fundamentally shifted in 2026. The direct-to-audience pipeline is fully established.
It really is.
It's like we moved from a walled garden where traditional news gatekeepers told us what the flowers were into a hall of mirrors, which are these algorithmic echo chambers reflecting our own beliefs back at us.
That's a perfect analogy.
So what does this all mean? We all cheered for the democratization of media, but did we just trade corporate gatekeepers for algorithmic ones that only show us exactly what we want to see?
That is the ultimate paradox of the modern internet. We gained infinite choices, but the algorithms optimize those choices for comfort and engagement, which inherently drives polarization.
Right.
We traded human editors for mathematical engagement loops. Traditional journalism, bound by ethics and rigorous fact-checking, simply moves too slowly to compete with a feed designed to trigger your emotions instantly.
And just when you think this battle between the agile creator empires and the struggling legacy media is complex enough, the data throws in the ultimate wild card.
Oh boy, here we go.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
AI is putting this entire landscape into hyperdrive.
AI is radically altering the playing field on both sides of the equation.
How so?
On the creator side, AI native and AI-assisted channels are no longer a novelty. They are completely mainstream.
Okay.
The use of auto-dubbing and real-time AI translation is breaking down the final borders of content.
Give me an example of that.
So a Brazilian funk creator can film a video in Portuguese, and an AI tool will instantly translate the script, clone the creator's voice, and manipulate the video so their lips perfectly sync to perfect English, Hindi, and Japanese.
That is wild.
Regional content is going global instantly.
Which is phenomenal for global reach. But look at what AI is doing to the consumer side of the news, and it's incredibly bleak.
Yeah, it's a different story.
AI summaries are popping up directly at the top of search engines and social feeds, displacing clicks entirely. Why click the article when the AI just scrapes the publisher's site and tells you the gist?
Exactly.
But the darker side of this is the threat of AI slop.
This raises an important question. AI slop is the industry term for low-effort, fake, digitally generated content flooding the platforms to game the monetization algorithms.
Just absolute garbage content.
Right. It's rapid, it's massive in quantity, and it is actively degrading the trustworthiness of the entire internet. When deepfakes and generated text become indistinguishable from reality, the fundamental problem isn't just that people get tricked.
What is it then?
It's that people stop believing anything is real. A sort of digital nihilism sets in because anything could be fake.
So how is anyone fighting back against a flood of infinite synthetic content?
Newsrooms are trying to adapt on multiple fronts. According to the Future Media Hub's data, European newsrooms are spending heavily to build their own proprietary language models.
Why do that instead of just using ChatGPT?
Because global models like ChatGPT or Claude have built-in cultural and linguistic biases based on their global, predominantly English training data.
Oh, that makes sense.
Local newsrooms want models trained on local, verifiable data to preserve regional nuance. Furthermore, there's a massive push across the industry for C2PA authentication.
Let's explain C2PA for the listener, because when I look at it, it seems like an ingredient label for reality.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. C2PA is an open technical standard, basically a secure digital watermark that proves the origin of a piece of digital content. It tracks any edits made to it. From a user perspective, you might see a small glowing icon or a metadata tag in your browser when you look at an image.
And what happens when you click it?
You click it, and it definitively tells you, this photo was actually taken by a physical camera by this specific photographer at this exact time and place, and it has not been digitally altered.
Wow.
It is cryptographically proving humanity.
An ingredient label proving humanity. But this raises a huge issue. As multimodal AI tools like VO3 and Sora 2 begin to automate complex video and text production pipelines entirely, AI isn't just an assistant tool anymore.
No, it's not.
AI is becoming the primary new gatekeeper. It is deciding what gets summarized, what gets translated, what gets flagged as authentic, and ultimately what you actually see on your screen.
Which brings us to a profound concern. If the creator is increasingly relying on AI to write the scripts and generate the visuals, and the consumer is relying on AI to summarize the news and filter the feed, what is left for us?
Right. I have to pose a philosophical pushback here. Looking at this ecosystem, if AI is over there generating the video and AI is over here consuming and summarizing it, are humans even in the loop anymore?
It's a dark thought.
Or are we basically just the biological battery providing the engagement data that powers a conversation between two algorithms?
We are dangerously close to that reality. If the human experience is reduced to simply providing the behavioral metrics that keep the servers running, we lose the core of what media was supposed to be, which is connection,
Yeah.
transparency, proving you are human, and building genuine interactive communities. Those are becoming the rarest and most valuable currencies of trust we have left in a synthetically generated world.
It really puts our digital diet into perspective. To quickly summarize what we've unpacked for you today, we have journeyed from the repetitive, algorithmic comfort of a toddler watching Baby Shark 16 billion times to the sheer psychological engagement power of MrBeast's global short-to-long funnel.
Quite a journey.
We've explored how creators are building immersive thirdscapes while traditional media is struggling to adapt to a world where trust has collapsed, news fatigue is rampant, and traffic is drying up.
Yep.
And accelerating all of this is the wild card of AI, which is simultaneously breaking down global language barriers and rewriting the very rules of reality and gatekeeping.
As we navigate this shifting landscape, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
We've talked about creators building massive virtual worlds and AI seamlessly generating content. As platforms continue to merge gaming, social media, and artificial intelligence, consider this. In the near future, the most influential media you consume might not be a static video you watch or a podcast you hear.
What will it be?
It might be a fully customized, AI-generated virtual world that reacts entirely to your specific mood, your pulse rate, and your subconscious preferences in real time.
That's terrifying.
But when reality becomes that perfectly personalized, when you spend your time in a universe built exclusively for an audience of one, what happens to our shared human experience?
From the all-you-can-eat buffet that studies you, to a digital kitchen that cooks a completely unique reality for you before you even place an order. It's brilliant and it's chilling. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious.